Welcome to the Lester Dent Master Plot Formula lecture. What we're going to be doing in this lecture is talking about why a pulp writer from the 20s, 30s, and 40s has so influenced all of modern fiction, and how you can learn from this master plot formula. First off, need to go and download the master plot formula. It is easy to find. It's just under Lester Dent Master Plot Formula. Click on it and print it off, and it's about 4 pages long, and it is very dated in its language because he wrote it back in the 30s, and you know, and it's one of those things where you want to read it, you want to and look at it. A lot of us have studied it a lot, and I'll explain this more as we go along here as to why and what it is. But it's also the influence of this. Now, Lester Dent was a major pulp writer, and he also wrote, you know, for what are called the slicks, you know, Saturday Evening Post and things like that. But for a long time, he was one of the top pulp writers. In fact, he wrote under the name Kenneth Roberson, which was Doc Savage, and you still find Doc Savages, you know, on the stands everywhere. He was Doc Savage. He was the creator of Doc Savage. He wrote an original novel, Doc Savage novel, every month. He wrote 159 of them during the run. Of the 189 total Doc Savage novels that there were, he wrote 159 of them. He went for almost a decade without missing a month writing Doc Savage, as well as writing other novels, as well as writing other short stories, as well as doing other stuff. He literally, I mean, he wrote under a lot of pen names, so that's why you probably don't know the name Lester Dent. He had a major influence on writing, modern writing, everything about writing that goes on today. All the bestsellers in one way or another follow the Lester Dent Master Plot Formula, and I'll explain that as we go along as to how and why. A lot of them don't realize they're doing it, simply for the fact is that, you know, when you are the person in a new growing world of fiction, which is what the Western tradition of fiction is. You know, and it changed after, you know, the 1890s, and so it became a different form, and he was one of the people who created the form that now we see on television and all that sort of stuff. How the Lester Dent plot formula came to our modern consciousness, that it even existed, other than the fact that it's just in all of our writing, and if you're emulating, you know, John D. MacDonald, then you're emulating the master plot formula. You know, if you're emulating basically the Alex Cross series by James Patterson, you're emulating the master plot formula. If you're emulating Nora Roberts in romance, you're emulating the master plot formula. You know, I mean, so it's so basic anymore. But where it actually got some attention again is by a great British writer, fantasy writer, by the name of Michael Moorcock. And Moorcock, in numbers of articles, especially an article about writing a novel in 3 days. Yes, that is possible. No, I have not done one in 3 days. I've done novels in 6 days and 7 days, and I have a ongoing thing on my blog now about writing, you know, out in public, sort of like what Harlan used to do when he would write a short story sitting in a store window on a manual typewriter and paste the pages as they came off the thing. He'd paste them on the window so the people outside the store could read his story as he was finishing it. That's sort of what I'm doing in a way, in kind of a modern way, on my blog. But Moorcock, in some articles about writing a novel in 3 days, basically came up with this, you know, brought this forward in time and started talking about it. And that's in essence where it kind of, the actual article itself, Lester Dent's Master Plot Formula article, got reprinted and brought forward, and now it's easy to Google and print off. So, but it was Michael Moorcock, and you might want to, if you're interested, read some of his articles about how he sets up to write a novel in 3 days. Realize that in Britain, writing fast is not an evil thing. like it is over here. Commercial writers are celebrated for writing fast in Great Britain, unlike in America, where you tend to, unless you're an idiot like me, you tend to keep your writing process a secret because you don't really want people to know that you might have written that great work of art in 12 days. Or like Hemingway did, for The Old Man and the Sea that won the Pulitzer. He didn't want anybody knowing that he wrote that to a magazine editor's deadline while the magazine editor was sitting in his house waiting for him because he was late in 12 to 14 days. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you tend to in this modern world, especially in the States, are very hesitant about talking about as a writer. But there are some of us who talk about it. Michael Moorcock over in Great Britain talked about it. They had a contest. I'm not sure if it's still going. I'm too old to try to participate, I think, because writing fast is, really super fast is a young person's sport. Some of our best writers in the commercial fiction were very fast writers in their day. Lawrence Block, Mike Resnick in science fiction, Robert Silverberg in science fiction, Harlan, of course, Harlan Ellison. Ray Bradbury, he would write a short story a day. These people were very, very fast. And over in Great Britain, there were numbers of writers who have written upwards of 1,000 books or more in some of their cases that would participate in a yearly celebration. And what the rules were is that you had to have a contract from a reputable publisher for a novel, and that you would sit down in an auditorium type of situation where people could be in the stands watching, and a lot of these things would fill these gymnasiums and stuff, and it would come down to usually 2 or 3 people at the end in the finals trying to write a novel to contract that the publisher had to accept on first draft, had to accept and they would it would be a weekend kind of event. They would write an entire 60,000 word novel in a weekend. And Moorcock, I think, participated, Fanthorpe, Cook, and numbers of other great British writers participated in this competition for fun. And then Moorcock did articles about it. But he harked back to the Lester Dent master plot formula, which is the basis of all Western fiction at the moment. And Dent was the one that sort of came up with it. And I'll explain as we get through this lecture how it is the basis and how it works. If you've downloaded this and are looking at it, and all you can see is the really dated language, I'll help you get through that too. So we're going to talk about that during this. Lester Dent was an amazing person. So let me go on here with a couple more introductory videos before we actually dive down into the master plot formula. Back in a moment.